All right. So the thing we do to start off with as well is we need to make our thumbnail faces. So AJ does a thumbnail for the episode. And
do we need to go like...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
But
ready?
yeah, so just whatever you
Fuck,
think.
I hate this.
But the thing is, we released this part of us explaining it to you as well.
Okay.
So people know.
Everybody do this. We'll make a big fleshy prison as the thumbnail. Alrighty, do we need to do a sync clap,
Yeah.
or you can sync it with this, or
It's
Do a
just a
sync-
clip. It's for
Okay.
fun.
3, 2, 1. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome along to a very belated episode of Meeting of the Elders. This is a show on the Cult Popture podcast where we visit our cult elders over on our Patreon and we get their thoughts on the last 3 episodes of the podcast that we've done. Because of Richard going to the UK and then also forgetting to give me the audio for the latest episode,
Top of the morning to you.
making it late. This is going back a little bit, but this is primarily going to be a Star Trek reflection episode, and we have, as people on the video version can see, our good friend Andrew Todd in, who is our residential Star Trek expert.
Residential?
Yeah.
I don't fucking live with you, AJ.
Yeah.
You live in the same city as me, that's enough. So we'll get to the Patreon after we talk to Andrew. Andrew basically has gone through all of the episodes that we recorded on Star Trek and noted down any very sort of like finicky things we've got wrong for a good old-fashioned actually, because if you're gonna do an actually, you go whole hog, you know.
Yeah.
You don't just joke about it.
I
Like,
don't
let's
go
actually
half
get
hog.
into the weeds. Yeah.
It's also worth
yeah.
noting we are standard to do this.
Yeah.
Unless
Yes.
unless you want it to be like, I was so mad at the things you got wrong, I had to come on the episode. In which case,
No.
I'm happy to say that that's what happened.
No, you asked me to do this. I wouldn't voluntarily come on your podcast. Actually, like the first is actually just what you just said, which is most of my comments are just kind of things that are, kind of spring off little discussion points from what you talked about. Like there wasn't a huge amount that you got like straight up wrong. There are a few things. But I mean, I attribute that mostly to Richard having the Wikipedia right in front of him. But there are a few like interesting things where you guys were like, this is a weird thing, or we don't understand that, and there's a whole conversation around it.
There's a lot of context there, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I had a segue into it.
This always happens.
Context probably being the main thing, which is I thought that it was kind of insane that you decided to get into Star Trek with Star Trek the Motion Picture being your introduction, because or just with the movies being your introduction.
You're not the first person to say this. I've had people have told me over the weeks we were doing it, like, how can you even understand what's going on and things like that? And it became one of those things where it's like, this is just what the podcast is, but having it sort of wind up with us doing Star Trek from like the outside in almost is like, that's interesting content in and of itself, an interesting podcast in and of itself in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, no one complained when we did just the Yu-Gi-Oh movies that we didn't have all the context.
Because, like for the original series, you're coming in and those characters have been around for 60 to 70 hours of TV. For Next Generation, it's like 100 and something, 100 and... Yeah. I should know this, but I don't.
We're
and
not
so
the
characters,
for not knowing how many
the characters are all like the characters are all like really well established at this point. And so the movies get by on a certain degree of shorthand. And they do a little bit of work setting them up. And I think actually the the thing that I came out of this trio of podcasts that you did with was, if there is an endpoint for modern audiences into Star Trek, it's the J.J. Abrams film, the first one.
There you go.
Because that one actually does set up all the characters, because it's setting them up for a completely different audience, whereas the motion picture was kind of for the audience of the original show, even though it was quite a few years after. It was like a decade after the show.
And I've upon reflecting, I'm listing Star Trek the motion picture in my 4 faves on Letterboxd at the moment.
I like the motion picture. It's a good movie.
Yeah. I was so moved by it, but I think the reason I connected it with it so much is the same reason why a lot of Star Trek fans didn't like it. Like, I liked being plopped into this like very abstract, very moody, slow-paced like meditation of a film, whereas then I watched the ones that everyone likes, and I was like, I don't know, like these feel too like insider now, these feel too cool, whereas I kind of liked the weirdness of the first film.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's always this kind of tug of war conceptually about Star Trek movies, because it is fundamentally, I think, a franchise that's more suited to television, because its stories are often more character driven, or they're driven by ideas, and they're not so much driven by spectacle, as much as they, sometimes try to do that. And it's very suited to a show where we do a new story each week.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work for movies, which kind of have to be events, especially in that weird setting of we've done a TV show and now we're doing a movie. It has to like earn its even more than any other regular sci-fi movie would have to. It has to earn being a movie.
Exactly.
And the motion picture, I think, is kind of one of the very few that would not work as a TV episode. I mean, you could do it as a TV episode, but it would not be anywhere near as good. It relies on the the Robert Wise kind of widescreen compositions and the Doug Trumbull visual effects and stuff. It relies on that scale. Split diopter shots. That's just a Robert Wise thing.
Before we get into the notes and stuff, I just so people get your qualifications, what is your history with Star Trek, and
my qualifications?
What does it mean to you, this franchise?
I grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. My dad is a massive Trekkie, as I'm sure is the case for a lot of Star Trek fans my age, a parent being into it. And I absolutely just like loved it as a kid, and I watched Star Trek Voyager religiously when that was on. I didn't watch Deep Space Nine when I was a kid, but as an adult, that's like easily my favorite of the shows. One of my earliest memories is we went to Universal Studios, and they had this attraction there that was like a live stage, like Star Trek stage show, but they would get like audience volunteers as you were queuing up to play a lot of the kind of background characters and all of the Klingons.
Yeah.
So they'd get people out of the queue and take them and then put them in some like real rudimentary makeup or Starfleet costumes or whatever. And like there was one speaking Klingon who had like one line in Klingon that he just said like 10 times or something. And at the end they'd give you like a videotape of that thing, and my dad was one of the Klingons in that one that we saw, and I wish that I could say that it was a really fond memory, because I was fucking petrified the whole time. And I was like, I remember it clearly, but I remember hiding behind the seats and like peering out because I was just so scared. The tape, none of the characters in the stage show were the characters from the shows or the movies, but when you got the videotape, it like spliced in clips from the movies. So it was like there was, but like recontextualized to fit into the story that they were telling on this stage thing. So like the Enterprise crew was like off to the side also doing things. And all of those clips, like, I know from that.
Yeah.
As opposed to from their original context, because
Nice.
I wore out that tape. I tried to digitize it a while back, but the tape's just absolutely cooked. And I'm very sad. That was a really big tangent.
No, that's
but,
great. I mean, yeah.
The
I think
origins.
as well that like you are, I think it's fair to say, a very passionate fan, or like things that you're a fan of.
I mean, you brought on your autistic friend who's a Star Trek.
I wanted you to say it. No, but that like it's, you know, when you, it's not just like, oh, I like Star Trek. It's like, I want to know everything about Star Trek. And
Yes, when I was a kid, I had a Star Trek book that was just like a Star Trek encyclopedia, and I would just read that. That was my pleasure reading, and I would just learn and memorize facts about Star Trek, and it's always been my number one. And there are other, you know, media franchises that I like, but like none of them brings me the joy that Star Trek does.
Nice.
Star Trek's so diverse as well, which is the good thing. Like it's a good desert island pick because you've got a lot to choose from.
Yeah, at this point, I think they're in a couple years maybe, if they keep going at the current rate, they'll hit 1,000 episodes.
Oh wow!
Made of Star Trek.
And have you seen all of those episodes?
I haven't seen all of them.
Okay,
I've seen
got a real fan on.
Yeah. I've seen. I have. There are a bunch that I've seen like many times.
Yeah. You've watched 1,000 episodes of Star Trek. Some are just
I've
double up, so.
undoubtedly I have spent at least 1,000 hours watching Star Trek. I've probably seen Star Trek First Contact fucking 25 times or more.
Are the episodes that you haven't seen, are they like big groups of episodes, or is it like, what's the situation there?
Like, frankly, it's kind of the earlier seasons of DS9 and TNG that I'll just go like, a lot of these are really dire, and I'll skip a lot of them. Same with Voyager.
Nice. I love that we've got someone who's you've just espoused like how much you truly love Star Trek, and even you are like, but no, some of this is pretty fucking boring.
I will. That's the thing, though. I think part of being a Star Trek fan is being able to be okay with the fact that like a good portion of it like kind of sucks. Mm-hmm. You were talking in the podcast about you tried to watch The Cage, the original unaired pilot of Star Trek, the original series, as you're way into the show, and it's like, this wasn't even the pilot that they aired. This was the one that was like, this isn't good enough to put on television.
Do you know? In my defense, though, it's Netflix's fault. I was like, I'm going to start Star Trek. I clicked on the first Star Trek show, clicked on the first episode, and that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mistake. That it should literally be the last thing that they show you as like a novelty, because it's not even the same characters. Yeah. Like a lot of the original series and a lot of early TNG is like kind of dull, and you know, there's a lot of episodes that are like fucking silly. And some of them are good, silly, but some of them are just like kind of embarrassing. And I think part of being a Star Trek fan is like learning to accept that and like love the franchise for all of its faults.
Yeah, right.
Nice. Is it a fandom? Like, I know there's a lot of Star Trek, Star Wars, and a lot of other fandoms like that where it's like no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. Would you consider Star Trek a toxic fandom? I feel like I don't hear about it being as toxic as some others.
I think these days it's probably better than it used to be. I think the fandom is probably by and large older now. And there's also just so much of it that, like, you know, if you don't like Discovery or whatever, you can just rewatch DS9 for the 15th time or whatever. Yeah, right. And because there's been so much bad stuff, it's like, fucking who cares?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I do know, I did see it popped up on my Facebook feed, I think, a newspaper article from when The Next Generation first was announced, and people were so mad. or at least the selection of people that this news article decided to report on were so mad that they were doing a show that wasn't about Kirk, Spock, and Bones. Yeah. You know, it was like, they're trying to replace these characters and all that kind of shit. Yeah. And then obviously the show came out and it's wildly successful. I think nowadays it's pretty. Honestly, when we get like a filler episode of Star Trek, where all like Star Trek fans are kind of like, yeah, this is the shit we love.
Yeah.
Because we like these weird little detours.
Give us a boring one.
Yeah. We like these weird little detours that kind of like don't contribute to the plot, but they kind of go off and explore this character or this little idea or something. Yeah.
Well, Andrew,
shit, we haven't even started talking
now
about
now that people trust you and your Star Trek knowledge, lay it on us. What did we get wrong? And what other fun little facts do you have for us?
Oh god, it's mostly fun facts. It's mostly things where you were like, "Oh, this is really interesting." I'm like, "Yeah, Star Trek fucking always does that." So like, oh god, yeah. So starting with the motion picture, like the idea of non-corporeal life forms or life forms that are kind of outside the conventional definition of what life is. You like one of you was saying like, "Oh, this thing about V'ger being this like new form of life, it's like so novel and such a cool sci-fi thing." And it's like, yeah, that's something that Star Trek always does. It'll be like, oh yeah, here's this life form that's just like a cloud somewhere, or like that's just exists in between the space in between atoms or something like that.
Yeah, right.
So so that's another. I mean, it's another reason why the motion picture is a very, very Star Trek movie, because it's about this. It's seeking out new life, right? And it's not just like new alien species. It's like seeking out new definitions of what life is.
Nice.
Cool. Which is also like something philosophically that I really like about Star Trek. I think it's inherently a very progressive franchise.
Yeah. I agree.
As discussed a lot on in your discussions of it.
Is there a trans character in one of the current series?
I'm not actually sure if so. There's in Discovery, there is a character who is a Trill, which is a species that is like a joined species where there's like a symbiont little worm like that lives in the stomach of the humanoid host. But the worm lives for like centuries and will be transplanted from host to host. And contains the memories of the previous hosts and stuff. And that's something that was introduced in the 90s and inherently kind of has this kind of trans-adjacent concept to it. And it was certainly used in that way in Deep Space Nine, where one of the regulars was a Trill character, and there was but had previously been a man. And there's a lot of memes like trans rights memes around how that character is treated in the show and how it's like really considerate and thoughtful.
Right.
Like this Klingon character going, "Curzon, my old friend," and she's like, "It's Jadzia now," and he's like, "Jadzia, my old friend." And it's like, that's that easy, guys. But this character on Discovery is played by a trans actor. Or non-binary actor, and no, the host is a human played by a non-binary actor. The Trill character is played by a trans actor. I think I'm getting that right around.
I imagine that Star Trek isn't the kind of show that receives a lot of backlash for casting a non-binary actor and things like that.
No,
I mean, there's always going to be
how do you mean?
A small, like,
no, like
amount of
I think, there's always people who are like, meh. Usually they won't come out and say that's why they're angry.
It's the classic.
It'll be.
I just don't see what it had to do with the story.
Yeah. But they're like one of the villains. A really big theatrical con-esque villain was in Strange New World season 1 was played by a trans actor as well. Quite a fun sort of space pirate type character.
Wonder how my parents deal with watching all of this. Because we know they watch Star Trek, but we also know they have some pretty funny beliefs. So I wonder, I wonder how they grapple with watching these shows when they
just have to keep repeating. It's only a TV show.
It's only a TV show. Yeah.
These aren't historical documents.
Yeah, but they've Star Trek's it's had its share of like problematic attempts to deal with kind of
social issues.
I don't know, social issues like. The Next Generation had a few like pretty rough episodes,
like very special episode kind of things.
Yeah, like there was an episode where like God, I haven't watched it in a while because every time it comes up, I skip it. But there's like a species that I think it's just like flipped to where like heterosexual romance or sexuality is outlawed on this planet, and it's just like a real ham-fisted. You can see there's like intent there that is like probably, you know, positive, but it's like the execution is just diabolically bad. And it always involves Riker trying to sleep with someone. So yeah, it's but like, you know, they get better, and like, I don't know, this franchise has existed in so many decades now, and I think like it's just it is itself a sign of the changing times as well.
Anyway, sorry.
Shit. Sorry. Again, you got the wrong person on to keep on track. Yeah. So what are we? You talked a bit about, I think it was when you got to Star Trek 4, talked a bit about like the movies doing different genres.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that the shows do a lot. Like Strange New Worlds probably is the clearest
Which did a musical
version of that
recently,
because
right?
Yeah, they did a musical episode recently, but because that's only 10 episodes a season, I suppose they used to have 20, 25 or whatever. Each one is like much more like this. This is we're doing the submarine thriller episode. We're doing the horror episode. We're doing the aliens riff. We're doing the vampire episode. We're doing the body switch comedy episode. And that's something that they've always done, and it's an interesting thing about the movies where there's always this pull towards action adventure, whereas like on the shows it's like we're doing a science fiction show, and sometimes there'll be an action adventure episode, but episodes like stories like The Voyage Home are kind of more common in the show than not.
Which movie do you think best of the original 6 do you think best represents the TV show?
Oh, in terms of like story,
if you were just like you could only show
spiritually,
a person one movie, and you were like, this is kind of the vibe of the show.
It's
Jeez,
got to be Wrath of Khan, in terms of, isn't it? Surely that's the platonic Star Trek movie.
Wrath of Khan's pretty close. Wrath of Khan is an interesting one because it was made very deliberately as a tonal rebuttal to the motion picture, because they were like, the motion picture was too slow, people didn't like it, even though it made a bunch of money. We need something that's got like a bunch of action and a clear villain and stuff like that. I'd go like somewhere between the motion picture and Wrath of Khan. Like that's where Star Trek lives,
right?
Interesting, because
like the motion picture has the kind of big ideas, and actually like fucking Final Frontier. And like there's a version of Final Frontier I'm in some alternate universe that is a very, very good Star Trek movie that kind of does its ideas justice, I guess. I don't know, it's such a diverse
it's a hard question.
Franchise.
Sorry, I keep
hundreds of episodes. No, it's interesting. I'm gonna try and rock it through some of these things are like, I could talk to you for like an hour about Klingon foreheads. I think you asked, was there an explanation for it? And there's multiple explanations which all interlock together.
Yes, we talked about, because I talked about you on the episode saying you told me an explanation for why Klingons in the original series didn't have forehead ridges.
Yeah,
you told me after the episode came out that I'd got the explanation wrong or something like that.
You got it slightly wrong. I think you got the series wrong that had dealt with it.
Okay.
But that's minor.
Right. It's such a Star Trek fan thing to
Yeah. It is. Fun fact, the punk on the bus in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, who Spock gives the nerve pinch, reappears in season 2 of Star Trek Picard, where they go back in time to 2024 as an older version of that character, and like I can't remember how this exact scene went, but it's like he's got the music going, and then one of the characters like looks at him, like shoots him a look, and he like immediately is like, oh, sorry. And he's wearing the same costume that he was wearing like
That's great.
40 years earlier. Bones being racist is totally a thing. And like they even nodded to it in Deep Space Nine at one point. They go back in time. And the Trill character who had the symbiont who'd kind of lived many lifetimes, one of them, her symbiont had previously known McCoy, and it was like, oh yeah, I knew him when he was just a med student at Old Miss, and Old Miss University is like a historically like segregationist university.
That's correct.
It's like, oh man, were you making the joke that I think you're making? I think they were. I think that it's funny that all the movies are about the characters being old. And you made the point of like McCoy being older, and it's interesting because like in the original TV show, McCoy's just kind of like middle aged while the others are in their 30s. But the differences become a bit more pronounced as it goes on.
Yeah, as everyone becomes old, he just looks even worse, you know?
He just looks so... And he appears in The Next Generation, which is set like 100 years later. And he's like just so decrepit. They've put old DeForest Kelley in old age makeup. AJ, your Shatner impersonation's very good.
Thank you so much. I never get complimented on my impersonations.
I deliberately don't compliment him on his
well, that's why you got me on.
Yeah.
Richard, I appreciate you correcting AJ every time he says something fucking stupid.
One thing that I didn't correct him on that I should have, and because people have been mentioning it all week, is his pronunciation of Carl Urban. I was listening to the
as Urban.
Yeah, I say Urban. What's wrong with that?
I was listening to the podcast with Jess and her sister couldn't tell what you were saying. She thought you were saying Carlo Barn, like someone named Carlo.
That's her problem. That's not my problem.
And then it sparked a discussion in the Discord as well. But for me, just like AJ mispronouncing a last name, but especially like by over pronouncing it, is like that's like classic AJ. I can't get in the way of that.
Yeah.
That's AJ the original series.
All right, I'm gonna keep speeding through these. Boston Legal is a great show.
Yeah.
And William Shatner is like super good in it.
Yeah.
And the show like frequently made references to Star Trek in it. Like he'd whip out his phone and it would make like the communicator sound effect. Or like there was an episode where the legal case was about some fishermen or something, and they were talking about these I don't know, barnacles or something that attach to boats or something like that. And James Spader goes like, they call them Klingons. and Shatner goes, Klingons?
It's such an interesting show because it's dressed in the clothes of like a boring legal drama your parents watch.
But it's so funny. It's such a funny movie. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Star Trek 5 and 6 came out while The Next Generation was on the air, which is an interesting thing to think about when watching them. That like
people had already moved on.
Then the differences in age especially became like really, really pronounced at that point. Jean-Luc Picard being named Jean-Luc Picard, but being an Englishman. So this is explained in it. So in the Next Generation, he has a French family. Like they live on a vineyard in France, and he goes to visit them once or twice. His brother's name is Robert, but the British accent isn't actually explained until season 2 of Picard, where because there's an episode, like quite a good episode, where he has this. They go back in time and they find the vineyard that's like in 2024. It's basically a ruin, and because his family moved, basically the canonical story is the Picard family fled France in World War II to England, and so they just became British for a few generations, and so that's kind of what happened. And there's like. Yeah, and like the vineyard has like all these tunnels from like it being used as a resistance base.
I'm glad there is like an explanation for this. Like I feel vindicated in sniffing.
It's a good explanation too. Yeah, it's meaningful.
Yeah.
You were confused as to why why there was a Klingon in Starfleet.
Why is there a good Klingon?
Why is there a good Klingon? So, at the end of Star Trek 6, they're hammering out these peace deals, peace treaties with the Klingon Empire, and basically between that, there's like 100 years between that and Next Generation. There are further peace accords, and Worf is the first Klingon to serve in Starfleet. Right. Whoopi Goldberg's character is like from a species that lives like hundreds, thousands of years, which is why she has kind of a weird vibe. Of like this kind of all-knowing thing. What else we got?
Have you got about Will Wheaton not being in the movies, and like what's Will Wheaton's deal?
I'm not sure what his exact deal was, because he was in a few seasons of Next Generation, and then he left. So
like, was he not in the show anymore by that point?
Yeah, I've heard a few different. He became a recurring guest.
Right. Okay.
And I've heard a few different reasons as to why he left, and I don't want to like put words in his mouth. I'm sure he has explained it somewhere. But it would because he was a teenager.
Yeah.
So the show ran for 7 seasons.
Yeah, sure.
Like imagine, spending your entire adolescence doing a fucking TV show. It would ruin you. But he seems pretty well adjusted, so that's probably made the right choice.
Librarian movies?
Yeah, he did the audiobook for Ready Player One. He's doing just fine.
Yeah, he's doing great. He had a little cameo in Picard as well.
Oh, nice.
Being introduced to the Next Generation characters in the movies is even more insane than being introduced to the original series characters through the movies. Because like Generations came out like right as Next Generation was ending, and that show was I cannot stress enough how popular that show was at the time.
Right.
Motion picture was 10 years after the show finished. And this was like, everybody knows these characters. And so you do get introduced to Data in this kind of weird, like, let's do something wacky and wild with Data that's like really out of character. And it's very strange. And of course you have this thing also with movies that is different to TV shows, just in terms of format, where if you have a TV show and you have 25 episodes a season, you can afford to develop individual characters a couple episodes a season. In a movie, you kind of got like 2 or 3 main characters that you can give like decent screen time to, and everyone else kind of takes a back seat.
I think,
and like
the other thing as well is that like jumping into the original series movies, you've already got like that the original series is permeated through pop culture a lot more. That like you go in with kind of an understanding who Kirk is and
like certainly
Spock
Kirk and
especially.
Spock. I think you're
and then the Next Generation, it's like I kind of know Picard, but then like even what I thought I knew was quite different from what I saw in the movies. And like
I think the thing about the Next Generation characters compared to the original series characters as well is that they're much more like specific characters. Like with Spock, you can go like, he suppresses his emotions and he's all about logic. And like there's
Kirk
obviously more to him, but Kirk just like loves to fuck and loves to fuck up aliens. And there's more to him as well.
Bones is racist.
Bones is racist.
But it's, and Bones is racist and old.
Scotty is Scottish.
Scottish.
And Scotty is Scottish.
Chekhov's Russian.
I had a note there about Scottish accents as well, because like Strange New Worlds has just put Scotty on its show for the first time and has cast the first ever Scotsman to play it. Because Jimmy Doohan was Canadian and Simon Pegg is English.
Jimmy Doohan's Canadian. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's super Canadian. Like, you listen to him in interviews, it's so Canadian.
Wow.
Yeah. What else have we got here? So the female characters get hard done by, and particularly, well, in all of the movies, really.
Yeah.
Because they inevitably end up focusing on Kirk and Spock, Picard and Data.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. I think it would be different if they made movies of the newer series, because just the casts have more female characters and they're in more prominent roles. Like Strange New Worlds, I think, is predominantly female.
Right. So was I right in, or what's the deal? Because I was saying on the episode that there's like 2 to 3 main female characters in TNG. can you give me, like, in the same way you were like, Spock represses his emotions, is there like a quick pitch line for each of these characters, or are they just not really developed as much as the male characters?
I can give you Troy. So Deanna Troy is the ship's counselor. It's a very 1990s thing to have the ship's counselor on your fucking bridge of your ship. And like it's very like, it's progressive, but it's almost like comically progressive. And I think this is actually kind of a problematic thing, and it's never really addressed. She comes from a race of like empaths.
Yeah.
Right.
So she can literally like sense what people are feeling. So like as a counselor, it's like does that verge on kind of privacy issues? It's the kind of thing that on paper it's like, oh yeah, you make a great counselor. But it's like, oh, if you think about the ethics of it. And Crusher is the ship's doctor, and she probably has the least well-defined character. She, like, I could not describe her to you in a pithy one-liner.
Oh, but we want the pith.
She's like,
we want the pith.
Yeah, she's like,
the pith.
yeah, like, yeah. She's a difficult character to describe because I think the writers often didn't know what to do with her, and like that's
well, that's like 90s,
or she was just like the doctor.
Male writers' rooms, right?
Okay. What else have I got that I can speed through? Speed run.
This might be massive spoilers, I'm presuming.
Shit.
But what's the deal with Data coming back in Picard?
Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. So he appears in season 1 at the very end of season 1 of Picard in kind of like a vision.
Yeah.
So it's not really. It's kind of a digitally induced vision, because Picard himself gets put into an android body at the end of that season. That just looks identical to Patrick Stewart at age 80 or whatever. Yeah, they're like, we'll put you into an android. Your body died, so we'll put you into an android body that is exactly the same and will age normally. But he comes back in season 3, because all the characters come back in season 3 in the form of, they go to this like space station that's kind of a repository of scientific secrets, I guess. And there is this android there that is Brent Spiner, and he's got the brain engrams of Data, because there's kind of a hint at the end of Nemesis that they've like maybe been able to like Data's mind might be locked in there somewhere in B4. But this character has like Data Lore, who is Data's twin brother in Next Generation, who's like the evil Data.
Yes.
Brent Spiner has a lot of fun. He's played so many fucking characters in Star Trek. Little side note, he played the creator of Data, and also multiple generations of that family.
Yeah.
all of whom are either like robotics engineers or genetic engineers. And they all look identical throughout the centuries. So he's got the personalities of Data, Lore, and B4 all kind of like fighting for dominance, and
right. So
that's kind of
B4...
his arc for several episodes is like, how do we get to, and ultimately what happens is, and this is spoilers for Picard season 3, is he finds like Data kind of takes dominance, but he sort of like takes elements from the other two, and he sort of becomes the most human he's ever been.
Right. Because so B4 is the Nemesis character.
So Lore is the Nemesis character. B4 is the childlike one that they find on the planet in Nemesis.
In Nemesis the movie. I don't mean... So,
right.
So Lore is the Nemesis in the sense that...
Lore is his Nemesis.
But B4 is the one that appears in Star Trek Nemesis. So is B4... does B4 have any presence in anything other than Nemesis and...
His head appears in Picard season 1 in a drawer. Is literally like...
That's so funny.
They go to get some of Data's memories out of him, and they're like, oh yeah, we keep him in this drawer. It's just like his head and a couple of limbs or something.
Because I was just thinking, if this is the final thing we see of TNG and they've replaced like this beloved character and everyone hated it, you'd think it'd be like a Jar Jar Binks thing where they just quietly swept him under the rug and acknowledged him as
no. They like it was surprising actually when Picard season 1 aired how much they like went with stuff that happened in Nemesis,
Right.
and they were like, this
is interesting. Yeah.
And then season 3 was like very much like we're gonna do a final season of TNG effectively, and it's kind of a victory lap for those characters.
Nice. Where are we on your list, Andrew? Have we got a lot to
go? We're over halfway.
Cool.
I want to say a little something about First Contact, being a movie that hits on something that is not talked about much in the context of Star Trek, which is that Star Trek is a post-apocalyptic franchise.
Yeah, right, true, because they talk about World War III in that
Yeah,
movie.
so like basically like starting next year, I think in the in the chronology is the Second American Civil War, which then escalates into in fucking Strange New Worlds they use clips from January 6th. Describe it. It's very on the nose. And that kind of escalates and it gets wrapped up in this like whole genetic engineering eugenics thing, and then a whole bunch of things come together, and there's like a decades long war that is fought with like nukes, or at least briefly fought with nukes, and it takes like decades. Forget what they call the period, but like basically there's this period where basically civilization is in absolute tatters, that you see kind of the tail end of in First Contact, when they go back in time. And like, what a baller move to go like, we're doing a Star Trek movie and we're going to go back in time, but we're not going back in time to anything familiar. We're going back in time to 2063.
So it's still the future
like
for us.
Immediately following this fucking thermonuclear war. Yeah, and it's because like Star Trek is this like utopian society, but it's like things had to get really fucking bad before we turned around and built this society. Yeah. And it took centuries to build that society as well. Yeah. So yeah, that's something that I really like about Star Trek that isn't really discussed much because it's kind of a downer. That's cool. But it's it's just one of the. And, you know, like, the first warp ship is, like, they make a big deal out of, like, it's a nuclear missile. Yeah. Like, I didn't quite clock the significance of that when I saw it as a kid. But it hits a bit harder as an adult. Yeah, on also a First Contact thing, the whole idea of, like, the Prime Directive and developing warp drive being where you enter the galactic kind of society is like such a cool thing. It's such a cool thing, and it's like a very clear bar to get over, and it makes sense as the thing that would get you into that club.
I reckon that's one of my favorite pieces of lore I've ever heard from anything. It's such a cool little like, you know, yardstick.
It's a great like using the rules of the own world as well. To like
because they always had this Prime Directive where, like, if a civilization hasn't developed warp drive, you can't interact with them. And it's only once they develop warp drive that you go and make First Contact and invite them into the Federation.
It's so good. It's so great.
Yeah. The Lower Decks show is set on a ship that specializes in Second Contact missions. So they have like they have the flagship like go to like, you know, be like, we're the Federation and we're gonna, and then this ship comes in and we're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna supply you with some ore and some like, you know, or just do the real grunt work part of bringing you in.
That's so good.
I think it's so funny and it's such a good idea. Jonathan Frakes as a director is an interesting one because he's not Robert Wise. He's a director who cut his teeth doing TV, cut his teeth doing Star Trek, and he is often hailed as like one of the best directors of Star Trek by Trekkies. Yeah. And the reason for that is just like he gets it. Yeah. And like you talk to any of the actors and not just the Next Generation actors who obviously know him really well, but like he's apparently just really great with actors. And he gets great performances out of people. He can deal with a lot of different tones. He's very versatile. And he gets the fucking job done.
Yeah. When you watch Thunderbirds, like, you can see it.
And like does that make for like the most you know, for a movie that has the the most distinct cinematic identity? Like, no, but you know, I think like First Contact in particular has like some really great performances, and I don't know,
I just think it's neat.
Gets it. I just think it's neat. I like that movie. I like it. Oh, there was one thing he said that was really wrong, and I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? In First Contact, where he's like, oh, they shoot the missiles at the at the warp ship, but because they're in the holodeck, they miss. I'm like, they're not in the fucking holodeck.
Are they not? Oh no, it's a fake. Are they? Where are they?
It's like the missiles get fired. They're in the engineering, and they fire the missiles, but Data just deliberately misses.
Oh right. Was there another thing where someone was in a holodeck and it was how they saved?
They do go to the holodeck into the like 20s nightclub,
right? No.
Or 40s nightclub or whatever.
I wonder what. Maybe I'm misremembering.
Gangster
it.
thing, which is
a
recurring thing from the TV show.
We got a well actually. We finally
Yeah, I
got
like
to,
that.
like, a genuine.
The first thing that's like actual a correction, you just got real defensive.
Yeah, what do you fucking mean?
Yeah, this thing that you asked me to come on to. I think we're done with Next Generation. Other than like what I said about Data as a character being introduced as doing really out of character things is kind of similar to Picard as a character, because like in the movies he kind of transforms into this action hero.
Oh, is that not how he is on the show?
Fuck no.
Oh my
He's
God,
like
that's so
a diplomat's
interesting.
diplomat in the
Wow.
TV show. He is like all about like, we're going to discuss the philosophy and the ethics of every situation ad nauseum.
Because
He is the captain. He is the captain who will out talk and out negotiate anyone.
Whereas Kirk just out fucks them.
Kirk just
He's looking pretty good in First Contact when he's like
he looks
jumping around, like getting out of the way of the weird evil substance or whatever it was.
Yeah. All right. Home stretch now. So I don't have that much to say about the Abrams. Pretty much everything I have to say about the Abrams films is about fucking Into Darkness.
Well, so this is actually a great time to bring all that up then, because on the episode, I basically said, if you think this movie's bad, it's because you're a Star Trek nerd.
Well, yeah, I think that, there's definitely some of my dislike of it is because of, I don't know, misappropriation of Star Trek stuff. Like and I think it's just like, and I think it's honestly, it's the same shit that got pulled in The Rise of Skywalker, where it's like, my name is Khan is like the same as like, you're a Palpatine. Like, it's just like, it's empty. Like, it doesn't fucking mean anything to the characters, And also, it's not like Benedict Cumberbatch is like playing he's not really playing classic Khan as well. He's just playing a new character. Here's the interesting thing. Khan's full name is Khan Noonien Singh. And I'm going to go on a tangent from this tangent. The creator of Data, his character's name is Noonien Sung. And they're both named after the same, like, this guy that Gene Roddenberry, like, served with in the military. And he just, like, named two characters.
Like, probably felt bad naming, like, a villain after him. So he's like, I'll name a good guy after you do it. But Khan Noonien Singh, like, Singh is an Indian name, or South Asian name. And it wasn't until like this year that they had a South Asian actor play that character. Wow. Because it was previously Ricardo Montalban, and then the whitest person in the universe, Benedict Cumberbatch. Yeah, the other thing about Into Darkness that like really rankles me is that I can't remember which writer. I think it was Bob Orkey. Probably.
Or Orsi, or however, because it has a couple credited writers. But he, in the course of writing that, in the course of production of that movie, he was active on, I think it might have been a Star Trek board, or it might have been some other board, but it came out that he was basically like a massive 9/11 truther.
I remember that. Yeah,
and then the movie is like that's what the movie's about.
Yeah.
Right.
And so like it's this movie about terrorism, and like it's an inside job.
Yeah.
It is an inside job.
That sort of thing. And so it's like this really gross feeling watching it. Knowing that it's like this guy kind of, it's like, is he trying to do a psyop on the audience to think that 9/11 was an inside job? Wow. It's wild shit. You said something that was interesting about like the aliens in the Abrams films. About being like, it's like, oh, this is the stuff they wanted to do but couldn't afford to do on the TV shows. The same is true of the animated series.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Like so the animated series that had all the original cast on it, a lot of the writers were the same as well, and they basically were like, we can do all of the stories that we wanted to do on the original series, but because it's animated, we can do all these like crazy alien things and The animation was still super cheap, but it's like it's not significantly more expensive to animate a crazy alien than it is to animate a human.
Yeah, I guess that's good, because we were sort of wondering, it's like, does this go against the lo-fi thing that he was going for? But yeah, like, the animated series is a perfect answer to that,
Yeah, and like, the modern TV shows have more aliens in them as well. Like, Doug Jones plays an alien.
I didn't necessarily just mean the aliens are bigger. I mean, like, there's space battles and shit in the aliens.
Of course,
that, like, look incredible, and I can't imagine... They didn't look like that in the other Star Trek movies, so...
No. But I'll tell you what, the shows now look like that.
That's cool.
Right.
That's good.
The cost effectiveness of visual effects has come so far. Like, Strange New Worlds just looks, it's such a good looking show. And the only other, we sort of touched on this, but like Star Trek versus Star Wars in terms of cinema and cinematic language, and J.J. Abrams in particular, wanting to make Star Wars. It kind of goes to that same thing of like, what is a Star Trek movie, and like, how does it earn being a movie? And then like Beyond, you mentioned, it feels more like an episode of a TV show. It's got like a smaller scale, and the first half of it in particular is very like, we're on an alien planet and we're splitting up into teams.
Exactly.
And I think that is part of why a lot of fans really warmed to that movie.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you think of the J.J. Abrams clearly wanted to make a Star Wars movie criticism?
I think that so when it came out, Star Trek had been off the air for 5 or 6 years. And prior to that, there had always been multiple Star Trek shows on the air for a decade.
Yeah, right.
And so it was like an unbelievably long time, 5 years, which seems like nothing now, where there was just no Star Trek. And so like, I think a lot of people were just like, including me, just very excited to have Star Trek back. And it was like, if this is what we have to, if it has to be kind of this big action movie in order for that to happen, that's fine. And I think for the 2009 one, the casting was just so fucking good that it was just like, oh wow, we get like new life breathed into these characters, and I didn't really mind it. I think Into Darkness is where it's just the nature of the plot being this kind of like dark, gritty, 9/11 was an inside job movie. Just it didn't feel like Star Trek. It didn't feel like what are the ideas we're exploring here? The government wants to fucking kill you. Like, come on. Like, that's
Come on, hey, the government is above reproach there.
What is the Star Federation, whatever it's called? Are they good guys or bad guys generally?
The United Federation of Planets. So that's an interesting question.
So that's sort of the
generally good guys. Generally good guys. So yeah, it's basically while Gene Roddenberry was alive, like unambiguously good guys.
Yeah. It's so interesting from a writer's perspective, though, isn't it, to make them corrupt?
Yes,
isn't it?
And so Deep Space Nine, that was kind of the whole deal of Deep Space Nine. Is like, it's like, you've built this utopia. What are you going to do to maintain? What will you be driven to do to protect it?
Nice.
And
that's so good.
Because the series has this like ongoing arc about this kind of like evil conquering version of the Federation from a different part of the galaxy that kind of comes in, called the Dominion.
Yeah.
And so there's this war that goes on for several of the last several seasons of the show. It's also the first Star Trek show to really get into serialized storytelling in any sort of way. And yeah, it's got like plot lines about like, there's this sort of Black Ops scientific research division of the Federation that develops a biological weapon to use against their enemies, and it's like, what does that mean to us? There's an incredible episode where Captain Sisko engages in like subterfuge and forgery and murder in order to bring the Romulans into the war on their side. And it's like, at what cost to your soul, are you willing to go to maintain this perfect society that you've built? It's crushing a lot of the time. Yeah.
So one of the things that we gave you as homework when we asked you to come on the show was to cast a Kelvin timeline Next Generation cast. Did you do that?
Well, you didn't say Kelvin timeline. You said like an equivalent like reboot.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's Kelvin. I did.
Cool.
I've got some names.
Cool.
I got some names for you.
Let's do it.
So Picard, unfortunately, probably the two best options for Picard have already played young Patrick Stewart, which would be James McAvoy and Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
But for Picard, I've got Paddy Considine.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Some of these are like, so like I'm not. So I had a bunch of names, and I'm like I don't really give a fuck about. I'm not one of these people who's like, I'm recasting. I'm just going to cast someone who's like going to look like them.
Of course not. Yeah.
I want to cast someone who I think can capture some of the essence of that character, but also bring something new to it.
Yeah.
And like who else did I have? I had I was looking at actors in the age. So like Picard, when the show started, Patrick Stewart was 47. The character was 59, which must have felt really shitty for Patrick Stewart. So I was kind of looking in like late 40s, early 50s, I guess. And like I had some other, like Joseph Fiennes was on my list. Christopher Eccleston was a possibility.
Joseph Fiennes is such a good call, dude. I can totally. That's my new favorite pick. That's better than my Barry Keoghan pick,
right?
Because he's old enough for it as well. He could, older than Barry Keoghan is.
The person I really want to see play Picard, but it would be a terrible choice, is Matt Berry. But Paddy Considine, I was like,
there we go.
I don't know. Paddy Considine's just got like a different kind of energy to him that I'm like, I would really want to see him play like a Paddy Considine version of the character.
Nice. Who else we got?
For Riker, I've got my favorite actor to fan cast in anything.
Yourself.
Dan Stevens.
Oh yeah. What a genius. Of course Dan Stevens plays Riker. Great. All right, let's keep going. What's the next one?
Yeah. For Data, I've got Jonathan Groff.
Andrew, you're so good at this. You're so good. We do this on the podcast a lot, and you're a natural at this kind of thing.
I was like, it's Jonathan Groff or Ben Platt.
Yeah.
Like it has to be one of these Broadway fucking like creamy Broadway white boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Jonathan Groff would fucking smash it. All right, who have I got next? For Geordi, I've got Justice Smith.
Okay.
Oh
Yep.
From the Dungeons and Dragons movie and Pokemon Detective Pikachu. Geordi by the time of the movies, he's sort of like aged up a bit, but in the show, he's like quite a young character. Certainly at the start of the show, and like I think Justice Smith is a good actor, and I think he could rock the visor. For Worf, Winston Duke.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great.
Nice.
For the female characters who you'll have no idea what they're even like. For Counselor Troy, I'm is the term race bending, and I've got Dominique Tipper.
Okay, I'm unfamiliar. I'll look her up.
She's from The Expanse.
Yeah.
That's what I know her from. It would be Dominique Tipper or Jessie Buckley.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Jessie Buckley in a Star Trek movie makes a lot of sense to me, I reckon. But nice.
And for Crusher, I've got two options that I was like either Catherine Waterston or Anna Torv.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
Yep. I see it.
And I didn't cast Wesley Crusher because
you can't replace her.
That's Will Wheaton.
I would just cast Will Wheaton in that 14-year-old role. And just we've seen what the technology can do on the Star Wars shows.
Yeah.
So yeah. But if you were actually genuinely casting that would be the role that you're just like, no, we're just throwing auditions open and we just get some kid. Whoever
Another.
But yeah, that's my cast.
Cool. That's awesome, dude. I'm very impressed, and it's exactly what I was hoping you were going to bring to the table. I think Dan Stevens'
I think I'm happiest.
Riker is so good.
Yeah. I had a bunch of like Americans, and then I was like, I'll look at like English actors, and I was like Dan Stevens.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I believe that anyone in the universe would want to bang Dan Stevens, and that's the crucial thing for Riker.
Nice. Well, we are going to move to our Patreon messages now. Andrew, we will not force you to stay and listen to people talking for 8 minutes. People we love who are paying us money to do this. We'll let you go because you're not receiving a dime of this. So
yes, that's good. I also need to eat dinner.
Sweet as.
So
I have
so much
one
fun.
last question about Star Trek. It's referenced that there's no money in the. How does the economy work?
So this is something.
One last question.
If I was doing So if I was doing my continue the franchise, there's this period in Star Trek between the Undiscovered Country and the Next Generation that hasn't really been explored at all.
Interesting.
And it is in the Next Generation that this idea of like we don't have money anymore first came up, and so it's kind of just assumed that at some point in that century or so there was some kind of big social upheaval where they were like, you know what, like fuck currency, fuck capitalism, because they still have references to like credits and stuff in the TOS era. I don't know how it works exactly. My assumption is there's some sort of like UBI system. I don't think they use like a bartering system or anything like that. Like there's still people who like Captain Sisko's dad runs a restaurant and stuff, and like people still have jobs, but it seems more like people do what
they do it for the
things
love
because
of it.
they're motivated to. Yeah, and you know I'm sure all of the people who get up in arms about UBIs will be like, yeah, but what about people who take out the garbage? They'll never do it. But I'm you know like. I don't know how it works, but like that is a story that I would love to see told or.
But that's fascinating that there's that whole area that's unexplored for something that has.
It's called the
11.
There's some non-canonical canonical novels called the Lost Era, which kind of take place in that period, but they kind of tell war stories and stuff, and I'm like, no, tell me how they get rid of capitalism.
Nice.
Like it seems like such a Star Trek thing to tell a story about. Like I'd love to see that. So thanks for asking that question. It gave me an opportunity to talk about dismantling seizing the means of production.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. It's back with just the two boys now, and we're going to go through some correspondence. So firstly, we've got one message in the Discord from Cheese, so I'll read that out and then we'll listen to the voice notes. So Cheese says, original series. This is, of course, talking about Star Trek still. Original series. Very little experience with this other than memes. I remember watching the worst fight ever, which was Kirk against some monster on a barren planet, and it was real bad. Have you guys seen that? It's very funny. Parents were never really Trek fans, really. I've not seen it, but it sounds...
I think I may have
picture
seen... Yeah.
Yeah, well, nothing gets past you, Richard, so you'll have seen it.
Is that a dig?
No, it's not a dig. It was a compliment. Star Trek TNG. I remember watching some of these as well as one or two of the movies. I think I got into it, but now I don't really recollect very much about it. I do think that just watching the movies, you lose a lot of the character and depth and universe. 100%. It was a terrible way to consume the Next Generation, I reckon.
As we've just learned.
The Next Generation suffered a lot more than the original series,
Absolutely,
I think,
yeah.
because from just watching the movies. And they say, Calvin, I enjoyed the first one when I saw it. I thought it did a great job of rebooting the series and was also very funny. Into Darkness I thought was fine. I have no idea if I saw Beyond or not. I liked the cast quite a bit. I think doing a TNG version is a really interesting and cool idea. I didn't have much to say about Star Trek, but can each of you make up or guess the plot of an episode of OG or TNG? That would be fun. All right, Richard. there is an episode of Star Trek where the gang go down to a planet that is inhabited entirely with inhabitants that look like Patrick Stewart and are all played by Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's going on? And the reveal is that it involves some kind of like great distance time travel in which Picard like dropped something into the primordial ooze that
A load.
a hair follicle, a load. He jacked off into the primordial ooze.
My one is an episode of TNG, and they go down to this planet, and it is inhabited entirely by naked ladies. And of course, Patrick Stewart, he's seen everything. They try to cover up, but
two of them are sort of kissing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I'm intrigued by what Andrew said about how that they deal with certain different genres and things like that. Like, I'm much more like the way he described Strange New Worlds is almost like Community kind of thing. That it's like, oh, they're doing a genre parody this week, and
yeah.
I'm fascinated by that. Sorry, I don't have a more serious answer.
No, that's all good. We have some voice messages we're going to get through now. The first one is from Vinny. It's called The Search for Cock. Oops, VLC just crashed. Would you like to restart it?
Wow.
Yes, and can we do it quickly, guys? Thank you. Okay, alrighty, I'm ready to play. Are you?
Yeah, sure am.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Vinny here. My relationship with Star Trek is that I only care for the Kelvin timeline. I watched the first one, loved it. Watched Into Darkness, really, really liked it. Watched Beyond, really, really, really liked it. And now, I don't care about anything else. The reason I am here is because in between the release of Star Trek 2009 and Into Darkness was an in-canon video game adaptation simply called Star Trek, released on the PS3, 360, and PC on April 23rd, 2013. So the month before the wide release of Into Darkness. Developed by Digital Extremes and published by Bandai Namco of all people. It's described as an action-adventure third-person shooter with not co-op, but bro-op. It released to a Metacritic of 45 out of 100. Let me tell you the premise of this. There is this technical facility at New Vulcan that is developing new technology to help the Vulcans, prosper. There is this terraforming device that they created, but unfortunately, the evil alien race, the Gorn, has taken this device and is threatening to ruin planet upon planet to make more Gorn planets. So it's up to Kirk and Spock to save the day. Shockingly, the main crew are all in this game. It's the likenesses, it's the voices. You got Kirk, you got Spock, you got Bones, you got Scotty, you got Chekhov, you got Uhura, Sulu. Everyone is actually there. Now, the performances, everyone sounds bored. I mean, Simon Pegg does his best to, sound funny. Apparently, he did the most improv with his scenes. The most horrific thing about this game are just the animations of the face. Either it's too stilted and there's barely any emotions, or halfway through a conversation, their jaw unhinges and they say stuff with really big jaw movements, and it's horrific. Aside from that, this is just a not special third-person shooter with you controlling either Kirk or Spock. Now, they say the differences on it are Kirk is more shooter-focused, phaser with stun settings, while Spock is more stealth-focused. He can Vulcan nerve pinch and mind meld you, and he can freeze enemies. Gameplay-wise, not really. I mean, Kirk can also do stealth stuff, and the only thing he can't do is the mind melds, which you use to solve puzzles. There isn't really that much of a difference between which character you choose to play as. Creators of this game touted as how they made the script and then took a lot of notes from Kurtzman, Orsi, and Lindelof. What they failed to mention is after that first meeting, Kurtzman, Orsi, and Lindelof just stepped away and didn't want to help anymore. Playing the game, it's very much a cover shooter of, hey, we're at this section, go save blah blah blah, oh, there's enemies, cover shooter, go down, come back up, shoot. There isn't really anything special about it, which I'm not surprised by, as in this is a quick cash grab to make the brand more strong, even though this ultimately did hurt the brand. I'll get to that in a second. Weapons-wise, you have your phaser. You can either have it to stun or kill. Stunning just freezes the enemy in time so you can run up and melee them and knock them out, and then kill is it does actual damage. There's this whole subplot about a virus from the Gorn where it makes people go crazy, and that's the main premise where where they attack other places and they give it to like the local residents of the planets, and then that's why they're going crazy and attacking Kirk and Spock. And there isn't really any penalty when you kill a Starfleet person when they're like part of the craze and they're part of the enemy. Spock just goes, Captain, you should have done that. Let's try and have more self-control next time. But there's like no penalty, like gameplay-wise. Like it doesn't stop me. It doesn't say, oh, friendly fire, or, like restart the level. I killed a lot of Starfleet people because it's annoying the waves of enemies sometimes. Sometimes it's a very easy room where it's like 1 or 2 enemies, bam, bam, I'm going through. Other times, I have enemies literally spawning right in front of me and just assaulting me nonstop and I die. This game is glitchy as all hell. I had multiple instances where Spock would lean forward like a Smooth Criminal Michael Jackson move, and 2 times he would just do that for a little bit and then like straighten himself out. 1 time, however, he was completely stuck in that part and I had to reload the last checkpoint. Enemies were shooting at me through walls, but yet I can't shoot back through the walls to hurt them. There is Enterprise gameplay for like 2 sections where it's just simple like, oh, shoot, you're following them, just shoot the debris they're shooting at you, and then save up enough ammo to do a big torpedo attack. That was kind of clunky. There's wingsuit gameplay where it's just you going down a crevice or going in between ship to ship trying to avoid debris. Some of those were easy, some of those were bullshit where it would just spawn debris right in front of you and I died instantly. I had to restart it again. There was this cool section where it was kind of like Portal, where Kirk and Spock have these mini teleporter guns where they shoot each other and then shoot a place on the other end of the room to teleport them. It was kind of cool for a little bit, but then Spock just kept like glitching out for me because I played as Kirk mostly, so there's no real difference. So I would just teleport Spock, and then he's supposed to like shoot at me and then teleport me to him. Half the time he would just stand there jogging in place until finally he did the thing where he teleported me to him. There's a moment where I think this is supposed to be funny where Kirk doesn't remember Keenser's name. Like there's a part where Scotty's like, oh, you gotta go find him. He's in the engines. He's being trapped. So then you go find him. And then, there's this big like shootout, a big room and he's hiding in the corner. Then a cutscene plays where Kirk goes, crewman, I'm glad you're safe. Then a second later, Scotty comes in and be like, Keenser, you're okay. And then after that is when Kirk calls him Keenser. So it's like, did he fucking forget Keenser's name? And then now that he heard, he's like, oh yeah, Keenser, I knew that was your fucking name. The final fight is nothing. It's just a generic bigger enemy at the end, cover shooter, blam blam. And here's the thing, I didn't see it die because the way the cutscenes play out is whatever player you're playing as, you see their cutscenes. So at the final point, after you get rid of enough health for the final boss, it's that final boss has a friend of Spock like capture and you gotta take him down and then get out before the place blows up, yada yada. So because I was playing Kirk, it was this thing where I as Kirk go to save Spock's friend, whereas Spock goes to deliver the final blow. So the final cutscene I got was Kirk unshackling Spock's friend, then they both run out before the place explodes. The game ends with everyone going, wasn't that fucking crazy? Yeah. Oh look, we got a new assignment. Gotta go to a planet Nibiru, which is the beginning planet of Into Darkness. So this is specifically set right before Into Darkness starts. So as I stated before, this game came out in Japan, as in glitchy, not special, and all that. At the press event for the Blu-ray and DVD release of Into Darkness, this is what J.J. Abrams had to say about the game. The video game was a disappointment. It was something we were actually involved with at the very beginning, and then we realized it was not going to go how we wanted it to go, so we dropped out, but they still continued to make it. The video game could have been a part of this larger multimedia universe that helped the series, but instead, it emotionally hurt me because we were working our asses off making the movie Into Darkness, and then the game came out and got universally panned, and I think without question that was a factor that did not help the movie. And then J.J. Abrams totes how he's currently in talks with Valve for Portal and Half-Life projects. So ends another tale of a non-special licensed game. It's a good thing licensed games have died. Unfortunately, I'm still here because I get some enjoyment out of playing shitty games, and I'll happily do that for you all. Take care.
Vinny, it's a whole podcast concept that you're squeezing into our podcast, buddy. You should start your own show. Well, you do have a show, but it's not that subject. I think it's fascinating. I'm sure I've shouted out Mini-Me every time Vinny tells us about one of these, but check out the YouTube channel Mini-Me, who just uploaded a video today actually on the classic PS2 Rampage clone War of the Monsters, which I've played recently, actually. It was pretty cool. It's on PS5, remastered for PS5 at the moment.
I really like the idea of Kirk and Spock being the like stealth and action. Because I like, I think that that's a thing that you're quite a fan of and have talked about, and if you continue the franchises, is the idea that like each character having their own skill set is like something you're a big fan of, right?
Yeah, I like that, and I think it's stupid when it's just interchangeable, because it's like, who cares who you play as in CTR if you can change their engines, you know?
I agree. I think you shouldn't be stuck playing as a character you don't like because they have an engine that's cooler.
But I'm saying vice versa. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that there's I like cosmetic stuff in games, but it kind of bums me out when all it is cosmetic. You know, I think like new skins and stuff should give you other stuff to, you know, even just a little improvement. Like in Spider-Man, don't the suits all do something different or something like that?
They do, but you can when you unlock a suit, it comes with like a power that's like the go-to power for that one, and you can equip that power to any suit once you've unlocked both.
Okay, yeah, whatever. Oh well, that was great. Thank you so much, Vinny. We've got one final message here.
I love that we now have all these people that do like as much as if not more work than us.
Yeah. We got Vinny playing games and Rachel reading books, and Dan, he's just Dan. All right, I'm gonna play it in 3, 2, 1.
Aloha also means hello. This is Dan from Hawaii, calling in from Kaka'ako on the island of Oahu. I am here to talk about one thing only, and that is Star Trek 2009. First things first, I want to say that I enjoyed the Kelvin episode. I didn't listen to the previous 2 episodes on Star Trek because I haven't watched the movies yet, and I want to dedicate a lot of time to watch the show and the films. So you'll hear from me maybe a year from now in a Cold Elder segment for September 2024 about them. But for now, I want to talk about my unique movie experience with Star Trek. I went to see it with my dad. And we had an okay time. We really liked the movie, but nothing will compare to the first 10 minutes. You know, the first 10 minutes opens with that really grand space fight. It's just so enthralling. But the best thing about it is they fucked up our screening, and it was playing a complete silence for the first few minutes. And for a long time, we were sure it was an artistic choice. Like for a solid minute, we're like, okay, all right, yeah, going real, okay, all right. And then it got to the parts inside the ship, and there was talking, and there was absolutely nothing. And the audience actually got into it, where the audience started to like riff the movie and actually start to fill in for the dialogue. And they're pretty good at it too. Everyone's chiming in from all over the theater, like, you know, like, oh, they're attacking us. And my favorite was when I forget what it's fucking called, but the video screen comes in and the bad guy, you know, appears, and someone just chimed in, I'm the bad guy. It was great. I just want to share that, and I want to thank you for your hard work. I know it's been hard doing all these Star Trek movies. You bit off a little bit more you can chew. I'm excited for the next episode about, what is it again? Why am I blanking? Butterfly Effect. I didn't watch the movie, so I'm not part of the camp that thought it was good. I'm of the camp that probably thought it wasn't going to be good. And I find it interesting that it lost that MTV Movie Award to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I think is it wrong of me to think that's a comparable casting choice to cast Jim Carrey in a serious role versus casting Ashton Kutcher? I feel like Ashton Kutcher and Jim Carrey, like, is that weird? Like, they're both like, I don't know, that was kind of like casting against type. I don't know. Now I'm talking out of my Hawaiian ass. Who knows? No, I'm not Hawaiian. I don't have a Hawaiian ass. I have a really white ass. Nope, that's even weirder. I should really take one more take of this, but fuck it. I'm running out of time. Anyway, aloha also means goodbye.
Thank you so much, Dan. A very interesting question that's spinning around my mind is, are Ashton Kutcher and Jim Carrey contemporaries? Are they comparable actors? Because I feel like Jim Carrey's a much bigger deal than Ashton Kutcher.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe. It is, it's funny that, so because of the completely out of our control issues that led to the delay of the Calvin Timeline episode, we rolled an Ashton Kutcher franchise before there was any controversy about Ashton Kutcher. And then by the time it came out, it was weird for us to not mention it. So
Shelf
mentioning
life,
it now, that's weird.
Well, Richard, that brings us to the end of what's got to be our longest meeting of the elders yet.
But also our shortest meeting of the elders segment.
Yeah. I'll give you a meeting adjourned as we carry on our way. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following Cold Pop Show on Instagram and Twitter. You can also join our Discord and donate to our Patreon, where you get lots of cool things, including the post-credit scene, which is coming at you after this music ends. Thank you so much to all the cult elders and everyone else, Andrew, for appearing on the episode. And we'll see you next week with a Butterfly Effect episode. Thanks so much. Welcome along to the cult. What is it called? The post-credit scene. A segment of the episode where if you donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/coldpopshow, you get to give us something to talk about in this post-credit scene. Richard, who's it from and what is it?
This one comes to us from Vincent DiBiase. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Sorry, Vincent. But
Debussy?
A would you rather that always comes up in my friend group. Would you rather eat a burger made of human meat or have sex with a corpse?
Jesus Christ.
We
need to vet these questions sometimes, I think.
I would go the burger.
I would go the burger too.
Yeah.
I think it makes you less of a creep.
Well, this is the thing, right? Like if you found out your friend ate human meat, there's circumstances where you would be like, oh, that's, like, how did that happen? Oh, that's kind of mysterious. That's kind of edgy. If you find out someone had sex with a corpse, there's no circumstances in which you'd be like, that's a cool thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. So there's your answer, Debussy. It is the human meat option, without a question.
without question.
In fact, I want to do that. All right, cut.